can't touch this. You can't touch this. You can't touch this. You can't touch this.
A history of Canada's Wonderland, the 90s. Given the economic turmoils of the end of the 80s, a new decade was received warmly everywhere. This was not felt by Canada's Wonderland, however, as Toronto's reigning single Canadian theme park continued to grow and welcome record attendances throughout its early years. The city it calls home, Toronto, was experiencing a birth of growth that would continue into the 21st century, with a host of major new attractions and projects opening, including the Sky Dome, home of the Toronto Blue Jays, Wildwater Kingdom, the country's largest water park, and a new modern airport terminal. Canada's Wonderland was positioned for another decade of success, which the park's part owners, JDS Investments, wish to accelerate by proposing their own ambitious projects to further the growth of the area of Maple and the city of Vaughan.
Unbelievable! Now I know how a test pilot feels.
Jetstream is this monster airship that moves 360 degrees.
You hang there suspended, upside down.
Damn stories, huh?
Nothing beneath you but air.
You're in this power dive with 3 Gs squeezing you down.
For the start of the 1990 season, Canada's Wonderland introduced the newest attraction, Jet Scream, an intimate looping starship costing $2 million. The ride was located overlooking Skyrider next to the creek, where Windseeker, the ride that replaced it, exists today. It instantly proved to be a popular addition. The park was not the value it once was, however, with a new season's pass costing $41.95.
Eating, drinking, smoking, and the use of flash photography.
Canterbury Theatre that year debuts The Laser Zone, an action-filled experience to strawberry-scented smog and state-of-the-art lasers, featuring action heroes and scenes from many familiar, copyright-obscure action and superheroes. From August 9th to 27th, the park hosts for the first time a touring theatrical attraction, Cirque du Tonnerre, a 75-minute acrobatic performance and dance show inspired by Cirque du Soleil. Within that year, sometime around June, the park would eventually welcome its 20 millionth visitor, keeping it on track with attendance goals set a decade prior by the park's former founders, Taft Broadcasting. In late August, JDS Holdings announces a $2 billion plan to develop the remaining land they have next to the park on the north side of Major Mackenzie Drive. At its most ambitious, the planned development would include a sports arena as a potential home for the Toronto Maple Leafs, along with a new basketball franchise where at the time one had not been established yet in Canada. To end the year, the park's operators, King's Entertainment, honored all 141 permanent employees with a full-page ad in the December 5th edition of the Toronto Star. It could, however, also have been a sign of changes on the horizon after 10 years of park management by the company responsible for the park's existence. In 1991, with new tastes, trends, and most importantly, technologies emerging within the decade, the park announced its first major attraction for 3 years since the bat with Vortex.
The most awesome roller coaster ever is now at Canada's Wonderland, but there's one thing missing. The track. Vortex is here, hurtling at 90 kilometers an hour with nothing beneath you but air, and confront the power of motion as you plunge into chaos. Now feel the grip of Vortex. The
$6 million suspended aerodynamics coaster, the most ambitious in North America with its terrain layout and opening drop from atop Wonder Mountain.
Time.
Pepsi Cola secures the rights for numerous attractions within the park for the first time. and an exclusive deal. Now, Wonderland's exciting new attraction will be known as Vortex, presented by Pepsi. Nights of Fire, now presented by Hostess. And Kodak, securing the rights for Zumba Flu. Consistent sponsorship changes would plague the park throughout the decade.
Su quella seggiola.
That year, celebrating its own 10-year anniversary, Kingswood Music Theatre ramps up its concert offering by nearly doubling that season's offering of shows, with over 30.
Da tanto tempo che, grazie, volevo dirtelo, vivere insieme a te è stato inutile, tutto senza allegria.
A successful opening day with the new coaster thrilling visitors for the first time is overshadowed by financial problems felt by the park's owners, JDS, that emerge in late May. The company reportedly having to reorganize its finances substantially. The strain of such a large asset like Wonderland that was not easy to develop further put a strain on JDS's portfolio. Despite a 3.9% gain by comparison the previous year, by July, they reported a loss of $53.7 million. A recession overall was creating difficulties for every sector and household at the time, something not felt again by Wonderland, as Vice President and General Manager Barry Jones announced that the park's attendance that year exceeded the previous 12 days earlier, and at the same time announced another new $6 million investment for 1992. Splashworks, their first water park area and largest expansion yet in the park's history, with 10 acres of new attractions. The early 90s was proving to be a successful and important period in the park's history overall, but many changes were only a winter's thaw away that would see the face and feel of Canada's Wonderland morph into an altogether different experience. In early May 1992, JDS announces a development proposal for the park-owned land north of Wonderland on Major Mackenzie Drive and Jane Street for the newly commissioned Vaughan City Hall. By late August, however, JDS announces that they were still operating at a loss. Meanwhile, Paramount Communications, the operational arm of Paramount Pictures, purchases King's Entertainment and in so doing obtains a 20% stake in Canada's Wonderland, while immediately assuming ownership of the park's management and operational duties. Kingswood opens the season with the $9 concert series for music fans, including this published account noting a near 50% service charge of $3.75 and $1.50 mailing fee per ticket. On May 15, 1993, JDS Investments purchases the Bramley Holdings Group 40% equal stake in ownership of Canada's Wonderland, only to then sell their new majority holding to Paramount for $65.2 million. The park, for the first time in its history, found itself under sole ownership by Paramount. Paramount also purchased the majority stake in all the remaining parks of the King's Entertainment chain, thus inheriting their own chain of IP-ready attractions. Many of the park's originally memorable features like Bedrock, Zumba Flume, and the Grand World Exhibition and Smurf Cones were suddenly under threat, unbeknownst to the regular park goer.
Another image right now.
Despite the ownership changes, Canada's Wonderland still introduced Kids Kingdom and a slew of other new attractions in 1993. Kids Kingdom was the first stage in a complete makeover and expansion of the kids area of the park, specifically introducing a kids castle playground and retheming of Smurf Forest and Smurf Cave into the King's Treasure Arcade, along with a new cover for the Woodland Theatre. At that point, most of the Smurfs and Yogi Bear related theming, the latter once the official mascot of the park, was rebranded with little to no notice. The takeover becomes evident in August with the cosmic visit of the Star Trek Earth Tour, a traveling artifact and novelty exhibit ambled together under white tarpaulins to tour throughout the Paramount Group's newly acquired parks, and to promote none other than whatever Star Trek was on at the time. Sorry, TNG fans. Featuring the original set construction of Captain's Bridge for Star Trek The Next Generation.
This one must be royalty.
Klingons, Romulans, and Vulcans would also roam the park to greet and thwart guests.
My name is Lieutenant Loquacious. I'm of the Klingon Empire.
Earlier in the season, lesser-known aliens, the Coneheads, studied the park with a similar invasion effort in July. The Laser Zone in Canterbury Theatre is conveniently retrofitted with Paramount properties, providing a convenient venue to introduce IPs that will grace the park throughout the next few years. Also new to Canterbury Theatre that year, the park's first ice show, Hot Ice, for those still interested in a more traditional performance show, featuring skaters on a newly fitted ice rink on the theater stage.
Hey, Toto! We're not in Kansas anymore! Frankie Knuckles, up on the mountain here!
1994 saw the park officially titled for the first time as Paramount Canada's Wonderland, along with their newest major addition, Days of Thunder, based on the film of the same name, where guests were seated in one of two-seat motion simulator vehicles situated in theatrical rows and located in one of two large screening rooms. In an attempt to nullify the concerns of American influence, Viacom Canada was formed. The new satellite company would have a major influence on the management of Paramount Canada's Wonderland and theming throughout the next phase of its life. The resultant backlash to the sale, emergence of Viacom, and overall mechanics of Wonderland's new large parent company is beyond the scope of this brief account. Nonetheless, the life of much of the park's original theming, advertising, souvenirs, look, and overall experience, especially within the children's area, certainly appeared doomed.
Imagine if the whole world revolved around you.
Wilson! You forgot to study!
Don't worry. Here are the answers.
Well, at Wonderland, everything does revolve around you.
1995 marked the park's 15th anniversary, and the occasion was, as opposed to previous milestones past and to come, highlighted by the introduction of a major coaster addition.
You saw it in Top Gun, the movie. Now you can do it at Paramount Canada's Wonderland.
The Vekoma Suspended Looping Coaster, or SLC, from its introduction in the early 90s, took the amusement industry by storm, offering a revolutionary design that could both thrill riders and onlookers at an affordable price. Late in 1994, a display appeared in Grand World Expo announcing the arrival of a Vekoma SLC the next season. Key to its introduction was the demise of the ride at that point on the plot of land where this new attraction would be constructed. Zumba Flume, the park's aerodynamics log flume, was to be decommissioned, despite plenty of land being available for expansion at the time. The new ride would be also thematically out of place within Grand World Expo. However, for some time, this section of the park had seen a lack of consistency in its original vision, with its last major new addition, the nondescript Racing Rivers, itself nearing the end of its service life. Top Gun, regardless, would be a major roller coaster announcement for Canadian visitors, as there was no other ride of its kind available anywhere else in the country at the time. Top Gun, the park's second dose of Tom Cruise magic, opened to large and eager thrill seekers, with record crowds for the park continuing into the following season.
Signore e signori, un applauso per Eusebio! Eccolo qua! Grazie. Mi canterò.
After the tremendous local success of Top Gun in the previous season, 1996 saw the park double down on expansion by doubling the size of Splashworks. The Black Hole collection of popular dark slides debuts along with the first and Canada's largest wave pool. It was the first season where Kingswood Music Theatre, blaming a challenging American exchange rate and need to book more current and contemporary acts, abandoned its single-price, economically handsome concert series for shows carrying a price between $12 to $18. While some of the acts that year were familiar, it also featured major popular acts at the time, the Fugees and Cypress Hill. By late August, the park saw a single-day attendance record just shy of 100,000 guests when the park simultaneously held a Portuguese cultural event along with a popular local retail chain Employee Appreciation Day. Cars on Highway 400 leading to the park and on adjacent Jane Street were backed up for several kilometers as reported by police. Despite this, the park met no major incidents or disturbances during their busiest single day yet. While the area around Wonderland itself was under immediate threat for development by landholders including the park's own former owners JDS, residential sprawl was an inevitability in the adjoining properties to the park.
Everybody, rock your body right. Backstreet's back, alright.
May the 4th saw the opening of the park's 1997 season with the Drop Zone Stunt Tower, a 230-foot Intamin drop tower. The ride themed after a now easily forgotten film from 1994, and regretfully not incorporating any Gary Busey theming. On Sunday, June 22nd of that year, what was described in reports as a gang melee broke out during a Latin music festival. Around 100 gang members gathered, swarmed, and intimidated various park guests during the ordeal. While a fight broke out during the mischief, no arrests were made other than a single 17-year-old for narcotics possession. Regardless of this, the park promised to look into security as an early indication of permanent changes to come to the park gates.
All right, here they are. Heads
The Rugrats appear at Wonderland for the first time in 1998, continuing the near-complete erasure of all former Hanna-Barbera-related theming. Taxi Jam, the park's Ian F. Miller Jr. coaster, is added as the park's 10th to delight young children and torture enthusiasts with an exclusive coaster credit. James Bond also arrives in the form of 007, a license to thrill in the action theater simulator, replacing Days of Thunder. 1999.
Believe when I say I want it that way.
The park's final year of the decade sees the introduction of its 4th roller coaster over the period with The Fly, a Mack Wild Mouse introduced to International Festival on the plot of land once occupied by its neighbor Thunder Run. 2 new slides also debut in Splashworks, Super Soaker and The Plunge, along with the Dino Island 3D Adventure Ride.
Yes, that old Prince Charming wasn't after all. Got to show some different.
After 10 years of operation, a park cannot be graced without some tragedy, and these are some of the accounts that took place over that time. On September 7th, 1991, to close out the season, an employee appreciation party was held at the park. 3 park employees from the suburbs of Toronto were enjoying a night out together, remaining until midnight the following morning in the farming village of Stouffville, 30 kilometers northeast of the park. A farmer, out to feed his horses just before 10 a.m., discovered an overturned vehicle in a ditch adjacent to his property. Inside, he was horrified to find the recently deceased bodies of the 3 teenagers. While the accident was deemed to have occurred a half hour after they had left the park on Stouffville Side Road. There was no alcohol served at the event the teens attended, and the accident was deemed to be a tragic circumstance of an inexperienced driver. 1994. The park's popular Victoria Day weekend ended horribly as a visitor seeking a shortcut from the traffic lined up to exit the park drove over one of the land berms separating the parking lot from Jane Street and struck 2 individuals lying on a section of grass. The driver of the Jeep that struck the guests, both 22, was charged with criminal negligence causing bodily harm, along with failing to remain at the scene. In a dark close to the decade and season overall, 2 separate incidents at different parks in the Paramount chain prompted Wonderland to close 2 of its own rides for several days. In Santa Clara, California, a 12-year-old disabled boy fell from his supports and passed away despite being fully secured. In the other incident, a 20-year-old man became loose from his restraints and was killed while riding Shockwave, King's Dominion's Togo stand-up coaster. Both Drop Tower and Skyrider, similar to Shockwave, were closed for a few days while both incidents were investigated stateside. Both of Wonderland's rides were reopened after inspection and with minor modifications continued to run without any incident. As the season ran out its end for the 90s and the world became weary of chevrons and neon collages in place of Xboxes and cell phones, Wonderland was exiting the decade with a completely different face than it had at the start of the decade. Boomballs, karaoke music videos, and celebrities replaced the original theming elements along with all trace of its original owners from the theme park industry. Paramount and Viacom's takeover resulted in an almost too generic and commercial period for the park, and outside of one iconic attraction, lacked any major thrills in competition for global attention. This despite record attendances and stability as one of the world's most popular seasonal theme parks. Canada's Wonderland's sudden mediocrity at the decade's close seemed destined to never change. But the future would follow differently.